I need you to know something before I tell you this story. I am not proud of what happened. I have replayed it 1,000 times, looking for the moment I could have stopped it, looking for the exact second I should have walked away. And every time, every single time, I find myself back at the beginning, wondering how something so wrong felt so complicated to resist. This is not a love story. This is not a story that ends with anyone riding off into the sunset. This is a story about betrayal, about family, about the kind of secret that hollows you out from the inside and leaves you questioning everything you thought you knew about yourself. This is my story, and I am telling it because I know that somewhere out there, someone needs to hear it. Not to judge me, not to excuse me, but to understand how something like this happens and why it almost never ends the way you think it will. My sister Camille and I grew up close. Not the kind of close where everything is perfect, but the kind where you know each other's darkest corners and love each other anyway. She was 3 years older than me, more confident, more decisive. She always knew what she wanted and she went after it without apology. When she met Daniel, I understood immediately why she fell for him. He was charming in that quiet way that sneaks up on you, not loud about it, not performing. He just had this way of making whoever he was talking to feel like the most important person in the room. I was happy for her, genuinely. They dated for 2 years. They got engaged. I was her maid of honor. I cried at the wedding, the real kind of crying, not the polite dabbing kind. I loved my sister. I loved what she had built with him. And I told myself that the way Daniel sometimes looked at me, a little too long, a little too directly, meant nothing. I told myself I was imagining it. I was not imagining it. It started 8 months after their wedding. I had been going through a difficult time. A relationship of my own had ended badly, and I was spending more time at their house than I probably should have. Camille worked long hours. She traveled for work sometimes. And Daniel was always there. We would talk, really talk, the kind of conversations I hadn't had with anyone in a long time. About life, about regrets, about the distance between who we imagined we'd be and who we actually became. He was good at listening. He remembered everything I told him. He asked follow-up questions. He made me feel, and I hate that I'm about to say this, he made me feel seen. I told myself it was just friendship, that we were family, that there was nothing wrong with finding comfort in a good conversation with someone who happened to be my brother-in-law. But something was shifting underneath all of it, and I was choosing not to look at it directly. The first time he crossed a line, it was subtle. A touch on my arm that lasted a second too long. A look that said something neither of us was saying out loud. I moved away. I changed the subject. I went home and told myself it was nothing. But I thought about it for 3 days straight. Here is where I have to be completely honest with you, because this is the part people always want to skip over. I was not an innocent bystander in what happened next. Yes, Daniel pursued me. Yes, he was persistent in ways that felt overwhelming. Yes, there were moments that felt like pressure I didn't know how to navigate. But there were also moments where I made choices, where I stayed when I could have left, where I answered a message I should have ignored, where I told myself the line hadn't been crossed yet, when the truth is I had already crossed it in my mind long before anything physical happened. That is the part of these stories nobody wants to examine, the gray space between being pursued and participating, the way loneliness can make you rationalize things your clearest self would never accept. I was lonely. I was hurting from my own heartbreak. And Daniel had become the person who made me feel less alone in a season where everything in my life felt like it was falling apart. That is not an excuse. It is an explanation. And there is a difference. The first time something happened between us, we were alone in their house. Camille was traveling. I had come over for what I told myself was just dinner. I knew before I walked through that door that it wasn't just dinner. And I walked through anyway. What followed was the beginning of the worst chapter of my life, not because of what it felt like in those moments, but because of everything it cost me afterward. It continued for 4 months. And this is the line from my story that I can never escape. Every room became our secret. The kitchen where Camille made Sunday breakfast became a place I couldn't look at without feeling sick. The living room where the 3 of us watched movies together felt like it had a second layer underneath it that only Daniel and I could see. The hallway, the back porch. Every space in that house that should have been ordinary became loaded with something I couldn't undo. I started avoiding Camille, canceling plans, keeping calls short, because every time I heard her voice, genuinely happy, genuinely trusting, genuinely unaware, something in me broke a little more,
She would say things like, "I'm so glad you and Daniel get along. It means everything to me that my two favorite people like each other." And I would say, "Yeah, me too." I have never hated myself more than in those moments. The weight of a secret like that is unlike anything I can fully describe. It doesn't stay in the past where it happened. It travels with you. It sits across from you at family dinners. It stands next to you in photographs. It makes you a stranger to yourself in ways that don't go away just because the thing stops happening. It ended the way these things always end. Not with a clean decision, not with a brave conversation, with being found out. Camille saw a message. One message that I had been careless enough to leave visible. One moment of sloppiness after 4 months of careful concealment. She called me. I remember exactly where I was standing when my phone rang. I remember the sound of her voice. Not screaming, not crying yet. Just quiet. That particular quiet that happens when someone's world has just collapsed and they haven't yet found the language for it. She said, "Tell me it isn't true." And I couldn't. What followed was the worst conversation of my life, the kind that rearranges something fundamental inside you. She didn't scream the whole time. That almost made it worse. There were moments of pure devastated silence that I would have given anything to fill. But there were no words. There is nothing you can say in that moment that isn't obscene in its inadequacy. She hung up. She didn't speak to me for 7 months. Daniel had a different conversation with her, one I wasn't part of. One where I later learned he minimized his role significantly, where the story shifted in ways that protected him more than me. And I sat with that too. The particular loneliness of being the person who loses everything while the other participant in the betrayal navigates it with more cushion. My family fractured. My relationship with my mother changed. Christmas that year was something I still don't talk about. I want to step out of the story for a moment and talk about what was really happening underneath all of it, because this story, as specific as it is, contains patterns that are far more common than people admit.
This first pattern, loneliness as a vulnerability. When we are in pain, depleted, and disconnected from ourselves, our defenses lower. We become susceptible to connection in ways we wouldn't be if we were whole and rooted. This is not weakness, it is human. But it is also why healing your own wounds is not optional. Unhealed pain makes decisions for you. The second pattern, the gradual escalation. Nothing in this story happened all at once. It was a look, then a conversation, then a touch, then a choice, then another. This is how most betrayals unfold, not in one dramatic moment, but in 100 small ones, each one making the next feel slightly more possible. Recognizing escalation early, in yourself and in others, is one of the most important relational skills you can develop. The third pattern, compartmentalization. The ability to love Camille genuinely while simultaneously betraying her was not evidence of being a monster. It was evidence of how effectively humans can compartmentalize when we are motivated to. We are capable of holding contradictory realities in separate mental spaces. Understanding this doesn't excuse it, but it does explain why good people sometimes do terrible things. The fourth pattern, the unequal aftermath. When betrayal involves more than one person, the consequences rarely land equally. Power dynamics, gender, communication skills, and who tells the story first all determine who bears more of the weight. This is deeply unjust, and it is very real. It has been 3 years since that phone call. Camille and Daniel divorced 18 months after she found out. That is its own story, with its own layers that are not mine to sell. Camille and we are talking again. It is not what it was. I don't know if it will ever be what it was. There are some things that change the texture of a relationship permanently, even when forgiveness is present. But she called me on my birthday last year, and I cried for an hour after we hung up. As for me, I spent a long time in therapy unpacking not just what I did, but why. What in me was so empty that I filled it that way? What I believed about myself that made self-destruction feel familiar? What I needed to rebuild? Not just the relationship with my sister, but the relationship with myself. I am still building it. I share this story not because I am proud of it, but because shame kept me silent for too long, and silence never healed anyone. If you are in the middle of something like this right now, something you can't tell anyone, something that is hollowing you out, I want you to hear this. The secret is already costing you more than the truth will. Get out. Come clean. Get help. In whatever order you can manage. You will survive the truth. I promise you that. I am proof of it. Stories like this one don't come with clean lessons or simple morals. They come with complexity, with gray, with the uncomfortable reminder that the people who hurt others are not always strangers or villains. Sometimes they are people who were hurting themselves and made choices they can never fully take back. If this story moved you, if it made you think or feel or examine something in your own life, please share it with someone who might need it. Leave a comment below. Tell me your thoughts. I want to hear them. All of them. Even the ones that are angry at her. Even the ones that understand. And if you are carrying a secret right now that is eating you alive, my DMs are not a therapist office, but this community is a safe place to start talking. Subscribe if you haven't already. I post every single day. Take care of yourselves. And take care of the people who trust you.